So glad to be here today. I'm Kathleen Terry with South Bay Live, and it's my pleasure to introduce Linda Reeves.
Hello, Kathleen. Hello, South Bay Live.
We are here today to talk about a fascinating topic, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to meet what I think is one of the best resources in our community, and that is Linda Reeves.
Thank you.
She is not only a friend, but she also is a very knowledgeable person in all things having to do with the LGBTQ community. Now, before I start, I thought it'd be a great idea to give you a little bit of background on Linda, and I hope that you can look at her website a little bit later. But she is a licensed family therapist, and she's in private practice in the South Bay. And she's also the co-founder and board member of PFLAG, which you're going to hear a little bit more about later, and also very involved with the Beach City Health District on their adolescent task force. So her company is called Prism Institute, which she founded, and it's a full-service training organization that specializes in increasing awareness of LGBTQ issues, and this is definitely a topic that is important for us to talk about today. Linda holds a master's degree in clinical psychology with a specialization of LGBT affirmative psychology from Antioch University. Her training actually began at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, where she attained her clinical skills in the treatment of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender, non-binary, questioning, and queer-identified individuals. Now that is a mouthful, and hopefully as we go through the program today with Linda, you will find out a little bit more about what all these words mean and why they are important. So I know that there's a lot more I could tell you about Linda, but I think that in part she'll be able to share with us as we go through the interview today about herself and her background. Okay, Linda?
Thank you. That was
so. I wish I could do all of my questions by memory, Linda, but there were so many great questions we talked about that I said I better jot them down so that we don't lose any of them. So I want to start out by finding out, Linda, about a little bit about Pride Month, because one of the reasons we wanted to do this interview right now is because it is Pride Month. Yes. And I know people see this and hear about it, but I don't know that a lot of people really understand what is Pride Month, how did it get started, why are we even doing Pride Month? So if you could share a little bit about that to get us started.
Absolutely. The Stonewall Uprising is something many people might recognize. It was a riot, really a backlash in 1969 in New York City when LGBTQ people fought back. And a year later, they had a celebration of that event, and that began the celebration of Pride. So it oftentimes takes place in June, which was the month that this Stonewall riot occurred originally, and has just continued over the years around the world. And it's really an opportunity for LGBTQ people and allies to come together to celebrate the beautiful diversity of the LGBTQ community.
Okay, because I was looking at the different websites on it, and one of the things that I saw that I really liked, it said that Pride Month is where you affirm our obligation to uphold the dignity of all people and dedicate ourselves to protecting the most vulnerable among us. And I thought that was kind of a good explanation as well about that sense of dignity.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, Kathleen. Thanks for mentioning it.
So, we know that if you're a licensed family marriage counselor, there's
licensed marriage and family.
Oh, licensed marriage and family.
That's
great.
The LMFT, licensed marriage family.
Well, when I get caught on some of the abbreviations, you can certainly correct me, because, boy, I'll tell you, it's like almost abbreviation
alphabet
word soup, right? All right. So, you could have chosen almost any field to focus on, right? So I'm curious as to what was your passion to move into this area?
Well, I probably was initially stimulated when my son came out as gay in 7th grade. My son Levi was outed by a so-called friend. It was a very, very difficult time for him and for me as a mom. His friends kind of abandoned him. He was bullied. And that really was the beginning of my understanding of the challenges that LGBTQ people experience. This was a setting at middle school, right? And it continued into high school, and thankfully really got a lot better in college. And he's 28 now, and he's doing just excellent. He's a very happy guy. But when I was doing my graduate program, Antioch University offered the opportunity to specialize, and one of the specializations, and there are very few of the schools doing this, but they offered the LGBTQ specialization. And I thought to myself, what a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to know in a much deeper way about the lived experience of my son, as well as the broader community. So I took that track and specialized, and then later, as I learned about the way that LGBTQ people are discriminated against and the stigma that still exists and the internalized trauma that they experience because of a culture that doesn't accept them fully, I realized that more needed to be done. So those underpinnings and learnings really kind of launched me on not only my psychotherapy practice focused on LGBTQ people, but in launching the Prism Institute.
Okay, and I actually had the great pleasure of working with your son when he was in high school. He was in the Leadership Manhattan Beach program.
Yes.
So it was wonderful to see his growth and his future development. I know he's very successful
Thank you.
In his work. So you mentioned a little bit about the Prism Institute. That apparently is the organization that you founded. And I looked at your website, and one of the things that kind of I saw on the website is it said something about you want to your purpose of the Prism Institute is to change the focus from acceptance and tolerance to affirmation. Mm-hmm. And would you speak a little bit to that? I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yes, it's a subtle difference. And just to clarify, I co-founded the Prism Institute with a colleague and dear friend and classmate, Andrew Merrill.
Good.
So in learning so much about the lived experience and the stigma and the trauma that LGBTQ people experience, I recognized that there was a lot of people out there that felt like, okay, tell me the rules, how to tolerate these people in my business or in my life or in my apartment building or whatever setting they might be in, and I'll use the right language and I'll use the right pronouns and I'll do all the things I'm supposed to do. That's tolerating something, right? That is something we do with a cold shower. We may tolerate a cold shower, but it doesn't mean we like it, right? So what I recognized, and it was really my experience to kind of learn from, is that the understanding about the way that the culture oppresses and marginalizes LGBTQ people is really where the shift takes place. So the mission of the Prism Institute is to really create enough awareness about what it's like to be LGBTQ people in our current culture, so that allies and people on the sidelines have an internal experience of empathy and understanding, right? Of, wow, that's not good. We need to do something to make the world better for these individuals. And that's where the internal shift comes to affirmation.
Okay, all right. That is a subtle difference, very powerful one. Now, it's interesting as you're talking, and off your tongue, you say so quickly, easily, all those letters. LGBTQ. I mean, it's like, first of all, I wonder, because I go back in the day when it was just gay. Everybody was gay, right?
Yes.
And I'm curious, would you talk a little bit about how did it get such an inclusion, I guess? And, so it's lesbians, bisexuals, gays, trans people, and queers. Speak to me a little bit about that. Because I can tell you, a lot of people understand parts of that, but not the whole gamut.
Yes. Well, and I'm not a historian, so any historians that are watching will have to make excuse me for not including all of the different factors that contributed to that acronym. But one thing that came clear for me recently when I was speaking on Women's History Month was that gender is the component that actually binds all of those different identities. And I'll explain this.
Yeah.
That lesbian, gay, bisexual, LGB are sexual identity terms, right? That is the feeling that you have about someone you're attracted to romantically, physically with, right? The eros that you feel for someone is your sexual identity. Transgender individuals and are people who are experiencing their gender in a different way. It doesn't have anything to do with sex or who they go to bed with or have sexual experiences with. So we've kind of grouped sexual identity with gender identity in the acronym. But the interesting thing, like I said, is that the oppression, that they're not doing something in accordance with gendered rules. And that's the thing that kind of is common between all of them. Lesbians are having sex with other females. Females having sex with females. That's not the way the rules say. Heterosexuality is opposite sex interactions. Gay men are having sex with same-sex people. Again, breaking the rules. Bisexual identified people are having sex with same-sex and other-sexed individuals. So in each case, they're breaking a gendered rule. Right?
Right.
Transgender individuals are breaking the rule of their assigned sex at birth. Right? So a transgender individual is assigned a sex at birth based on whether the doctor sees if they have a penis or not.
Wow. Wow.
The doctor's not taking into account their chromosomes, the hormones that are going to come online when they reach puberty, any of the other factors that define a person's experience of their gender. So there's solidarity in coming together as marginalized groups, right? And so LGBTQ, Q being questioning, people who are questioning their gender or their sexuality, oftentimes Q stands for questioning. And then also for queer, queer identified individuals are people who don't fit neatly into one of the boxes.
Wow.
Right? And it used to be a derogatory term.
Yes, yes.
But it has been reclaimed. And so we sometimes will even speak to the entire community as the queer community. And we say that now in an affirming way, in a respectful way.
Right.
Whereas historically that was not so.
Yeah, because I remember in my earlier days, queer was a negative. You wouldn't want to call anybody queer.
Right.
It was a derogatory term. So I hope that for those of you who are listening, it kind of maybe cleared up a lot of the meaning of that, that acronym, because it's quite a mouthful if you're not dealing with it all the time.
And in writing, we actually put a plus sign at the end.
That means, and everybody else?
Because those 5 labels are only a fraction of the multitude that are actually being used and claimed by individuals. It's a very personal experience.
My gosh. You know, I'm watching on PBS right now a thing on mental illness, and one of the topics is what's normal. And there is a woman on there who's trans, and she's sharing how her whole life up to age 60, she never felt like she was a man, and it took her to age 60 before she was able to own her femaleness. Yeah, it's a really sad story, actually, that so much of her life was spent there. Now, when we talked about your son, and as a parent coming out, your son coming out, was that a motivation for why you decided to found with your colleague PFLAG?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, PFLAG, that's a wonderful story. I was introduced to some other moms. Some of the mothers had transgender kids, some had lesbian or gay kids, and there was a shared feeling of a time in our life when our child had come out when we felt very alone and very uncertain about how to be a good parent, who were we supposed to connect with, what resources were available. And there were a couple of the women, Tina Sarafa and Cindy Byrne, who had also been thinking about launching a PFLAG chapter. I'd had inklings to do so earlier. So we joined forces, and the three of us contacted the national organization, and together went through their process, and we now have a local, it's part of the nonprofit organization that was founded in 1973 back in New York City. There's over 200 chapters nationwide, and we have one now in the South Bay.
Wow. Now, PFLAG, then, does it have meetings, support groups? What does it do?
Yes, that's another acronym that's no longer relevant. But PFLAG was founded by a mom named Jean Mansford, who was marching in one of the first Pride parades in New York City with her gay son. And his gay friends came up to her and said, "Will you please go and talk to my parents? It's so awesome that you're here with your son. Will you share with them, these positive feelings that you have for him?" And she realized that so many parents don't accept and don't affirm their child's identity. So she realized that having a support group would be a way for parents to share what's on their hearts and what's in their minds with other parents who've been on a similar journey, and together find support within that group. So here in the South Bay, we have 2 meetings each month. The first meeting is on the first Tuesday of every month from 7 to 9 p.m. Previously, we were meeting at the Manhattan Beach Community Church, which generously offered us their facility. But with COVID, we're now on Zoom, and for the near future, until we can announce otherwise, we're still doing Zoom. And parents get together with trained facilitators who, bring a topic or whatever happened for the group, within the last month. They have a place where they can talk about it. We had so many parents coming the first few meetings that had transgender, gender non-binary, gender expansive kids, that we realized that there were unique concerns that those parents had, different when your child is experiencing a gender transition than a sexual identity coming out, right?
Yes.
So we have a second meeting on the third Wednesday of every month from 7 to 9, currently on Zoom, where parents of transgender, gender expansive youth.
So I was curious, Linda, about, you said that PFLAG usually has parents, but is it open to other individuals? Is it open to kids? Is it open to friends of? I mean, who are you going after here?
Absolutely. We do put a lot of focus on parents, but LGBTQ identified individuals are also always welcome. We find that LGBTQ individuals have a lot to share with the parents in terms of their experiences, and they can be very supportive. Sometimes they're also having their own struggles with their parents, right? And Zoom is giving us this opportunity to bring people in from all different communities as well.
Right. I like that. I like it because there's also some anonymity on Zoom that people who may be a little nervous about coming to a physical meeting have the option of the Zoom. So I hope that you'll not only do regular meetings in person, but
we might have a hybrid. Maybe so. We try. You mentioned children. We try to deter youth coming to the meeting. There are other groups out there that support youth specifically, and the reason that that's not really suggested is because it can be very difficult for an LGBTQ teen to be in a room listening to other parents talk about the difficulty they're having.
That's right.
So it's really not part of the mission to support children. They do come sometimes, and we find ways to organize the groups so that the children have a place that they can feel safe.
Okay.
But safety is the number one thing that we're trying to create.
Right, and we can find by going to PFLAG South Bay. Is that how we would find it?
It's actually pflagmanhattanbeach.org.
Okay, all right.
But we serve
for those of you who might want to check this out, I would suggest going to that website.
We serve the entire South Bay and beyond right now with Zoom, and there's a tremendous number of resources educational materials on the website, and you can learn more about the meetings and how to sign up.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I don't know about the audience listening to this, but I consider myself pretty knowledgeable on a lot of these issues. But, preparing for this interview, I really started to reflect a little bit about, it just seems like lately, and maybe it's as a result of Black Lives Matter and what's the diversity issues that have come up, that I'm seeing so much more activity, publicity. Hermosa Beach is putting a lifeguard station that they're putting in rainbow colors. Manhattan Beach is considering a rainbow crosswalk. These are things that I'd say before COVID weren't even being considered. Right. So is there a reason you think why all of a sudden we're seeing much more, I guess, discussions about this and talking about it, and people saying let's really open this up so people understand it? Is there anything happening that's causing that?
Yeah, it's easy to believe that there are more and more people that are suddenly LGBTQ, right? Mm-hmm. But anthropologists and archaeologists have research and data that shows LGBTQ identified individuals have been part of our experience, of a human experience, since the beginning of time.
Yes.
For various reasons, they've been written out of history. Certain institutions, find ways to oppress and discriminate against, so they're just not seen as often, and they don't necessarily want to be seen, right, in an unsafe community or place where they might be living. So the 21st century has kind of ushered in a little bit more space and safety for LGBTQ people. It always is going to depend on where you live or where you are in place and time. But in addition, we've got media, entertainment, news resources that are now making space for LGBTQ identities to be seen. Mm-hmm. So you've got various factors that are kind of contributing. Also, you have a younger generation of cohort, the Generation Z, right, which is people born, I think, 1993 to 2005, which are, kind of grew up with this more accepting and affirming, culture.
Right.
So they're less fearful of coming out, right? So you mentioned this person who was 60 years old who was just transitioning.
Right.
Kids now, although it is still incredibly daunting, are having a very different experience than that woman at 60.
Yes. I was reading the newspaper, the LA Times, just recently, and as you definitely know, the Las Vegas Raiders, Carl Nassar,
yes,
recently came out as gay, and there was all kinds of articles about it, but I found one article I thought particularly interesting, and the title of this article had to do with, people saying, well, who cares? This is not a big deal. And the writer of this article shared that it still took courage for him to come out. And it is still a big deal.
Yes, it is.
So what do you think about that, as far as, does it still take courage and risk for people to own the fact that they're gay or trans or whatever?
Yes, it is very big news, still big news. Mm-hmm. I think it will be for a long time because of the culture, right, that he was doing business in,
yes,
right, as a member of the NFL franchise and league, just like baseball or basketball or any other sports league. There's kind of a notorious kind of history of it being a place where heterosexual, in this case men,
right,
dominate.
Yes.
Right? So it would be very, very frightening and scary for someone to declare an identity that doesn't fit with the norm of the franchise.
Right.
And we saw this as well in the entertainment industry, going back to Rock Hudson or Tab Hunter, lived secret lives of gay identity and were heartthrobs, right? The movie studios wanted them to be attracting the females to the films.
Right.
So they had to hide that part of themselves. 2020 was a notable election for many reasons, but one of which was that almost a dozen politicians were voted into office in all levels of office, where we'd never before. We maybe had one individual in the state or Senate, but we now have almost a dozen visible politicians, making legislature for our country. So,
right. So, would you say that we're making progress? And if so, how much progress?
Clearly, not enough.
Okay.
In 2021, there are only 2 rights that LGBTQ people can count on nationally: the right to get married and the right to get a job and keep a job. There are states across the country that have more or less affirming equality rights for LGBTQ people, but it's almost as if every time a state allows another new equality opportunity for an LGBTQ person, another person in the legislature launches a bill to quash something else. I think this year there were 175 different bills targeting anti-LGBT bills, which was a 50% increase from the year before. So if you think about progress, I don't think that shows any sign of progress. And the really, really unfortunate and horrific part of this is that so many of the bills are targeting transgender youth.
Oh, right.
One of the most vulnerable populations we have. And that's really, our country is supposed to protect our vulnerable populations, but instead we seem to be victimizing them.
Okay, yeah. So we have much yet to do.
Yes.
Lots more to do, besides just painting rainbow street lights and fountains and whatnot.
And my son really has brought this to my attention. I was so pleased with all of the different businesses locally supporting Pride, and even on a national scale, major national brands, international brands, using the month of June to promote their brand, right? And he said to me, Mom, it's great to see more companies doing that, but what are they doing internally with their employment rules and their staffing and the vendors that they use? And this is where the kind of systemic change can take place, is when businesses recognize the vulnerability, like this idea of affirming, right? And then making change, really walking the talk.
Right. Yeah. It's that surface. The surface changes, they're very easy.
Yes.
But it's really not getting into the real discrimination that is going on.
Right. And it'll probably be a generational change, right? This next generation, Alpha, after Generation Z, is growing up in a different culture, with the Carl Nassars coming out and all of the different celebrities and politicians, where, they weren't around for the stigma, right? That, the older generations, wasn't until 1973 that the American Psychological Association actually removed the diagnosis of heterosexuality from the Diagnostic Statistics Manual, right?
Yes, which was the definer of what the mental illnesses were.
Right. So if people thought homosexuality was a mental illness up until 1973, and it's not. Here, 40 years later, we're still fighting against the stigma that's kind of lingering and remaining, right? So as time goes on, that is my hope that generationally this will eliminate and we won't have that anymore.
Right. So one of the groups I think that might be listening to this video are parents. And you as a parent went through this, and so it'd be helpful if maybe you could share a little bit of advice to parents if they discover that their child is gay. And I guess the trickiest part is when the child comes out and announces to the parent. So what would you recommend? How does a parent handle something like this? Maybe some few do's and don'ts, and then of course we can get into more detail
Sure.
later in a future interview of details, but
Sure.
few do's and don'ts.
So, first of all, we use this term coming out. And one of the things that I really like to introduce with my clients and my work is that it really is an opportunity for the LGBTQ person to invite someone in, right? We really are, an LGBTQ person really is sharing a very personal and intimate part of their self, their being, with another person. And so when you kind of shift that lens a little bit to recognizing the vulnerability that the person is experiencing, right? Because they've been thinking about their identity for so long. People don't realize for months and years even that this feeling that's kind of just building up inside that they need to declare their true identity to the world, right? But it starts with these little baby steps of inviting people in. So if parents recognize that, and the notion that you really only get one chance to make a first impression, right? The thing the parent needs to remember is to really lead with love. That's what PFLAG really, promotes, this sense of unconditional love, right? And I like to use that unconditional love. I love you, right? That's what the parent needs to say. They can drop the no matter what part, right? Because there is a little bit of negativity kind of woven into that no matter what, right? I love you. I love all the parts of you. I'm so thankful that you trust me, that you're sharing this with me. And then the next thing you want to do is, what can I do to be your supporter? I want to be in your corner. What is it that you need from me?
You know, the PBS thing I was watching, the young man who transitioned into a woman said when he told his mother that what he was going to do, she put her head on the table and sobbed. He said he didn't talk to her about that.
We refer to her as she. She's a woman.
Yeah, she. Yeah. The mother just put her head down and just bawled, and he said, "That's it." You know, he didn't bring it up again for like 30 years.
Oh, so this was back, yes.
Yeah, this was back before he had actually transitioned.
So you saw me correct you on that,
yes,
right? So the person who's identified as a female, we want to refer to her as a she.
Right.
So that is also, parents experience a lot of big emotions. Depending upon your child, the circumstances, your family background, your religiosity, any of the rules that you live your life under, your child's coming out is going to affect you in a myriad of different ways. Right. So parents struggle. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily make them a bad parent, but what we really encourage parents to do is to process their emotions outside the interactions with their child.
Right, and then PFLAG would be a great place to do that.
PFLAG, thank you, yes, is a wonderful place, or a therapist. What you really want to do is celebrate that moment with their child. It is really a moment when their child has determined they're ready to be seen and validated. So you really want to be there and let it be about their child. The other really important thing parents need to do is recognize that this coming out, this inviting in moment may not be something that they want to do across the board. They may be very selective about who they want to share this information with.
That's right.
So the parent needs to check in with the child or the adult child, whatever the age of the child, about who else is going to be, gets to know this information, right? Parents also can be very proactive in supporting the child if it's a younger person. The child doesn't need to be the one that does all of the coming out. Parents can call grandparents. Parents can call extended relatives. So that when you're having a family reunion or a family event, a celebration, the child doesn't have to go around and provide this update. Parents can update the family in advance, so that it can be a very comfortable coming together for the relatives.
And I know that in other conversations, I know you'll be writing a book for parents, and we hope that when that comes out, that'll be a wonderful thing for parents to take a look at. So
Yes.
So I'm putting that in the future, so you can come back and talk about your book with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, I think that, and one of the things I appreciate is reminding me, that language is incorrect. See, I think that's the other thing. People who are not, are that knowledgeable, we do need to be corrected. We don't know the exact, sometimes, ways of saying things, and to be open to hearing. It's not. You should call it a he or she or whatever. Which leads me to one of the questions that I have had is, lately I'm seeing now on people on Zoom especially, they're identifying themselves as he, she, her, he, him, and I know that there are people who are on these Zoom calls and they're going, okay, what's that about? The pronouns, people are changing the pronouns and how they're identifying themselves. Could you give us a little primer on what that's about, and should we be doing that, or what are your thoughts?
Yes. Absolutely. We should all be doing that.
Uh-huh.
We should be doing it on our Zoom. We should be doing it on our name tags, our place cards at meetings, even in our signatures on our emails. And the reason is that by eliminating that, I'm a cisgender woman, right? My internal experience of gender matches my outward expression of my gender,
okay.
Right? So there's a term we haven't talked about yet. Cisgender are people who have congruence, right, with their gender, right? Transgender individuals are people who experience this incredible distress and dissonance. Their internal experience of gender doesn't match their anatomical presentation or how people perceive them.
Okay.
Right. So up to this point, if a person has transitioned or is in the process of transitioning, right, a transgender person or a gender non-binary person who's not transitioning per se, but is not comfortable using male or female pronouns, right?
Like he or she.
Right. So a non-binary individual, another definition for you, is someone who really rejects this notion of the binary, right? Non-binary. They don't feel in their sense of gender that they fit neatly into the female box or the male box.
All right.
There may be components of each of those that they experience and express, but they don't necessarily buy into all of the expectations and stereotypes and experiences that our culture kind of mandates for males and females.
Okay,
right?
so if I were identifying myself, I would have she, her.
If that's how you feel.
And that would be me saying that, well, why can't I just say she? Or
So pronouns are used in different formations of grammar.
Okay.
So we sometimes use she, we sometimes use her, we
Okay.
sometimes use hers. So the full complement is she, her, hers. He, him, his.
Wow.
Right.
What do you
They,
say
them,
to
theirs.
people? What do you say to people who go, "Oh, give me a break"? And there's a lot of people, I got to tell you, who are going,
Well, what they don't.
How do you respond to that?
What they don't recognize, and this is at the heart of it for LGBTQ people as well as many other marginalized groups, is we come to this topic of privilege and power. People who are cisgender walk through the world with unimaginable, unrecognizable power and privilege. People who are transgender don't. So why should they be the ones that would have to declare their pronouns in every setting? And cisgender people don't. It's not incumbent upon cisgender people to do that. Transgender people sometimes need to declare their pronouns because their physical presentation
Yes.
doesn't yet declare their gender in a clear, understandable way. And it may leave some people feeling confused, right?
Okay.
So in making it incumbent upon them to always be the one declaring perpetuates this hierarchy.
Okay. I was doing a little bit of research on this, and there's a woman, Kelsey Pacha, and she's an inclusion trainer, and she said that by using pronouns, it's an identity-affirming behavior.
Absolutely.
And she says, by affirming a person's pronouns, demonstrates respect, reduces depression, increases self-esteem, and supports positive regard. So if I said, why do it? Well, here's some good reasons. It's not about necessarily you. It's saying that I am affirming others.
Right. And by an LGBT, a transgender, gender non-binary person using their pronouns and being affirmed with their pronouns, right, having someone use them in conversation, that person feels seen.
Okay.
And validated.
Right. It's a tricky world, isn't it? It's such a complex world.
I have a favorite quote.
Yeah. Okay.
It's by Eric Hoffer. He says, "In times of drastic change, the learners inherit the world. The learned usually find themselves beautifully equipped to live in a world that no longer exists."
Oh, I love that. I love that. So we want to be learners.
Yes.
Continually learning.
Yes. We are in the midst of an incredible, exciting gender and sexual identity revolution.
Yes.
We have our world has been evolving in these ways forever. Gender never used to look like this. Women couldn't, actually didn't look like this. Women couldn't wear pants. Women couldn't cut their hair short.
Or wear earrings in the
Women
workplace.
couldn't be therapists or doctors. So the gender revolution has been part of our culture for eons.
Right.
It's just presenting itself now in a different way.
Right. So I imagine there's resources available for people. Is there any?
Wonderful resources, as I mentioned, on pflag.org. That's the national website.
Right.
pflagmanhattanbeach.org. HRC, Human Rights Campaign.
Okay.
.org is an organization that supports equal rights for LGBTQ people. Gender Spectrum, if you're curious to learn more about gender identity, genderspectrum.org is a wonderful website.
You gave us that beautiful quote before. However, before we actually conclude today, is there any last-minute thoughts you want to throw in here?
Yes. I think one of the things that is common, and people who are listening probably, have taken in some information, but there's so much more to know, right?
Right.
What I want to offer is this idea of being compassionate with yourself, right? To know that there's so much more to know, right? To be a learner, to continue to look into this topic. But at the same time, if you misspeak or improperly pronoun someone, or aren't doing the best job with your child's coming out or transition, to be compassionate with yourself and to not give up, to continue to learn and to grow with this, and to be curious, right? Humans don't like to be confused.
Yes.
Humans don't like to be uncertain or wrong, but this is a landscape where I'm still learning. We're all still grappling with deeper understandings. So loving curiosity is always going to be your best friend.
Right. So Linda, if we have anybody that's listening today that would like to learn more about PFLAG or Prism or even working with you, where would they reach you?
So the best thing to do if you're interested in the education and training, that is the Prism Institute, and the website is prism, PRISM.LGBT.
Okay.
And then for therapy services, it's Beach Cities LGBT.com. And for PFLAG locally, it's pflagmanhattanbeach.org.
Good. So I hope that South Bay will put on their website some of these resources. Well, it's been a joy. I know that there's so many topics we could have talked about. This is a very complex issue, and I hope that we'll have an opportunity to meet with you again.
Thank you.
And get even more educated and aware on this very, very powerful and interesting topic. Thank you very much.
Nice to spend time with you, Kathleen.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you.